You're listening to Control Talk Now, the Smart Buildings Podcast.
With the man, the myth, the legend. Ken Smyers and Eric Stromquist.
Control Talk Now, the weekly podcast with building automation and smart building control news you can use.
Now, here's Eric.
Hi, welcome to Control Talk Now, your smart buildings videocast and podcast for the week ending April 11th, 2021. This is episode 396, where we talk about all things HVAC and smart building controls and pretty much whatever else. Your co-host and mine, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only controls man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Kenny Smyers wants to talk about. Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure. And we're coming off a great week from Ken St. Clair's Automated Building Edition, deep dive into adaptation and the art of survival. So I think this show here is going to be a great follow-up with that.
Well, we'll talk about survival now. Do not adjust your TV set. We're video only today. And those of you guys who know Ken Smyers, he's got perfect hair, but his hair wasn't quite right today. So we opted to do podcast only this week. So tune in next week. Kenny will have a chance to get his hair coiffure back up, so you can get that hair that you come to love and expect. But dude, it's kind of bad when you get the wrong conditioner. I mean, I hated what it does to my hair. Well,
that and the makeup was a real problem today. So, I'm really glad we're taking the pressure off me.
Yeah, my makeup artist wasn't very good either. So, again, next week we'll hope we have our makeup artist and our hairs just perfect. But Ken, you're right, man. But before we get to our guest, we got a really exciting guest. And anything else you want to hit on before we get there, brother?
No, just again, there's a Smart Building Cybersecurity Symposium coming on in the next week or so, and you got to sign up and register. But it's being conducted by Fred Gordy, who's clearly one of the leaders in all the thought processes and everything you do to make your building and your networks and your IoT, your operational technology, safe from hackers. So we recommend you sign up for that and make sure you attend it, because there's a lot of good stuff. And it's free. So that's always a nice thing, that you don't have to pay for it, because these things are normally, normally expect to pay, some sort of a fee for it, because it's just a bunch of knowledge that these guys work real hard to collocate and make it, in a presentable format for everybody.
Yeah, and of course, Fred Gordy is a guy we've known and loved for years, one of the first pioneers in cybersecurity in our industry. And we got Fred's scheduled to be on the show, I think, next week, Kenny, so we'll be doing that too. But definitely register for that show. And, hey, we took a little walk down memory lane on yesterday on Throwback Thursday, our trip to Liverpool and the Beatles. And, I think part of what goes on in this industry, man, and the theme today is going to be marketing, man. You've got to market, and we sort of drew some parallels between the Beatles and Easy.io and what was going on. And, creativity is creativity, and marketing is marketing. And those are just words, but if you don't get them right and understand it and are unique with it, you're just kind of like an also-ran. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think, that was a lot of fun. And I think Easy.io, of course, they did things right, because ultimately they were bought by Johnson Controls and integrated into a global platform that Johnson Controls has, and they're doing very well. So, that was a very win-win thing. But the thing that we were talking about with music and where the roots of it came from, the collaboration between Lennon and McCartney, the fact that they both lost their mothers earlier in their lives, and that might have led to a very emotionally charged songwriting that was very successful and really hit the hearts and minds of the entire world. So we went there to physically look at these places and then talk about it. But then the important thing was that there's a common denominator out there that we found that no matter where we went in the world, the buildings were our common denominator, and the people inside it. There's statistics saying now we spent 90% of our lives inside of buildings, and the corporate buildings especially have pressure now to begin to make those buildings friendlier, more occupant oriented, so that the occupant doesn't feel as though they're coming into a sterile environment. That actually sterile environment's a good one when you talk about indoor air quality and building health, and so that's one thing. But so I think it led itself very well into the whole trip. We were up there in Edinburgh, where we found out, where it was the center of culture and civilization, that there was the engineering prowess that came out of the medical, the science, the philosophic, gains that were made in that 100-year stretch there in Edinburgh was remarkable. And we got a chance to go from there down to Liverpool and check out the Beatles. So it was a wonderful trip.
Was that fun and whatever? We started at the Cavern. You can see the video. It's on Control Trends. We started at the Cavern where the Beatles play. Man, we went all around. Kenny, of course, is a great Beatles historian. So we went to all the places they were born, where they lived, where John Lennon's mom died. We went to Strawberry Fields. God, that was fun. But you said something, Kenny, I want our audience to hold on to through this episode, which is they captured the hearts and minds. Right. I think a lot of times when it comes to marketing, we think about the minds, but not necessarily the hearts. And if you can do that, you can be like the Beatles. But let's set up our guest and bring him in. And let's set it up by saying something that you and I have said for a while, Kenny, that if you don't have a great product, you're not even in the conversation. And there are a ton of people with great products. If you don't have great pricing, you're not even in the conversation. There are a ton of companies with great products and great pricing. If you don't have great customer support and a great brand name, you're not even in the conversation. There are tons and tons and tons of companies in our industry that have all that, be they manufacturers, be they contractors, be they consulting engineers, or be they property management, right? So what makes the difference? And Kenny, we've talked a lot about the fact that now more than ever, because of the competition, your messaging is really the differentiator when it's all said and done, be it your salespeople, be it your marketing folks or whatever. But we're going to focus on marketing today. And man, I am so pleased to introduce our guest. His name is Ken Christensen, and Ken is been in marketing for well over 30 years. I've had the pleasure of knowing Ken for most of those 30 years. He got started back in the day with Ted Turner, and hopefully he'll share some Ted Turner stories with us. And for those of you who don't know Ted Turner, if you're watching cable TV, you can thank Ted Turner for that. If you ever want to know why Jane Fonda smiles most of the time, you can thank Ted Turner for that too. And there's a lot more. But Ken Christensen, welcome to the show. And man, glad to have you here. Thanks for taking some time to speak with us.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's start with the early days. CNN. You get out of school, you meet. Tell us about Captain Outrageous, which is another thing that Ted Turner was called.
Well, that's from his America's Cup competitions, and actually, it was after the competition and he won. A lot of people saw his celebrations and his outspokenness about how he would control the cup, and that's where he earned that name. And one of the things that I often do is explain to people, for as outrageous as he came across, his brilliance was far overshadowed that. The guy taught me the fundamentals of marketing and of running a business. A lot of what you've spoken about, content obviously was key to him in terms of entertainment networks and news networks. He taught me a ton about something that I now see in practice, which is called the rule of three, which is if you can't dominate a category by being a top player, you then create a new category favorable to you and dominate that. And that's how CNN got started, for example.
Wow. Well, Ken, real quick, back up a little bit. And to start, how did Ted Turner get started? Because this story is worth telling. And, I guess his dad died when he was pretty young. And
yes. His dad had a huge outdoor company, billboards, very, very profitable business. And his father, unfortunately, passed away. And the company sold. Ted bought it back and then parlayed the outdoor company and the profits from that to start WTBS, which became the first superstation. He was cable before cable was cool, so to speak. Yeah. And everything derived from the superstation, taking the signal out across the country, becoming, America's superstation is how it was positioned. That's why the Braves were so popular everywhere, because they were everybody's team, because it kind of went into other markets, not just the local market, which most people are accustomed to.
Right. And he owned the Braves for a while, didn't he?
He sure did.
Yeah.
He was a great owner and beloved by the players, and I think by all of Major League Baseball. And Turner maintained the ownership of the team for many years. But everything that derived out of those early moves, very strategic moves on his part to understand the customer and to, what motivates them, what they want most. And then he supplied it to them, CNN and then headline news. He came out with a news network. And then based on that success, he found out there were other people who still wanted news, but in more consumable bites. And he created headline news. He was always looking at something on how to extend the reach of the company and fill more needs, whether it be entertainment with buying, MGM and Castle Rock and a number of things to provide programming. So everything he did was to feed his networks, be they news or entertainment.
So he was, to say he had his sort of hand on the pulse of the customer. Well, here's the question. Let me rephrase it. And Kenny, I think you'll appreciate this one. We've heard that Henry Ford, didn't really necessarily talk to his customers because he said, if I ask my customers what they want, they'll say they want a faster horse and buggy. And, same thing with Steve Jobs from Apple, was notorious for not necessarily asking his customers what they wanted. How did Ted fit in that regard? Did he decide what they wanted and give it to them, or did he ask a lot?
He was very client-centric. I remember the days of being in meetings with TV groups from around the country, because I was in syndication sales, selling product. And Ted would walk into the meeting, sit down and start talking to the client and be knowledgeable of that client. He had a great scope of knowledge and recall. And that endeared him to people. He did the same with employees. When we first started out in the first location, which is now the entire, it's called Techwood facility. It was an old country club that he purchased, and we built studios onto it. Then we bought CNN Center across town, and now all the big network buildings are back around that original place where we started. But he was very hands-on there because he had a condominium in both locations. And you could be working late at night and all of a sudden have him walk by and stop in and talk to you. And that endeared him to the staff, the employees, and people, I think, would do anything for him because he just understood people.
I seem to remember you telling me a story once that when Ted would come into a meeting, he kind of talked nonstop, right? But you said he would come up with 80 ideas or 100 ideas, just one after another, reeling them off. And most of them wouldn't be very good, but in that process, he'd come up with one that was absolutely brilliant. Did I get that story right?
Absolutely. He would kind of free think. I used to get a kick out of it because we'd be in a conference room and he would be walking around the conference table and then walk out the door to do something, whatever break he wanted, and come back in on continuing the same conversation. But what was key is there was a snippet, there was nuggets of gold in everything that he said. And he could speak about what to do for the sports teams, what to do for syndication sales, what to do for the wrestling network we had or the news network. Like I said, he had a great scope of knowledge and he understood people. And still does. And, he would align what we could do best with what they desired most, which is a marketing principle, a key tenet that we should always follow.
Well, I want you to say more about the one you mentioned. Would you call it the rule of three, or yes. Say more about that? And keep in mind our audience, from the manufacturers to the commercial real estate people to the contractors to the engineers. How do you advise your clients to implement that? Can you sort of give us an example?
Well, the rule of three can have application to a lot of things that you might do. First and foremost, it's innovation. If you have incumbents that are dominating, whether it's controls or some sort of real estate, et cetera, is coming up with a new idea that is more appealing to the client and answers an unmet need that you've discovered. So it's being able to pivot and give them what they want. And in turn, you can own that position. It's just like right now, what everybody is looking for. You mentioned the reset or the new normal that we're going to be coming out of. Expertise is what people want. In your business, for example, with controls, there's a lot of good product out there. So how can you differentiate? You can differentiate through your thought leadership, owning key issues that are important to your clients, and through service excellence. And I learned that from working with the executive team at the Ritz-Carlton. That is, we live and work in an experienced economy. And if you're the easiest company to work with, that overcomes the sameness of, product similarities. So I think that's what's key about those key tenets.
Kenny, I know you got a question. This is pretty hot, huh?
Yeah, the interesting things that you're saying here. First of all, it's fascinating to hear about Ted Turner because he should put a mark on just everything we're doing now. It seems to originate in some way, shape, or fashion from him. I remember seeing how the tank commanders were watching CNN because they get more intelligence from the television than they did from the CNN coverage than they did from their own sources because of the incredible reach he had. The things that we said offline, I think, are very important too. That As I look at marketing, I actually spend a lot of time in the classroom and read a lot of books about marketing, and always assumed that I had skills in marketing. But I see other people's marketing efforts, and I'm so there's all these incredible things like there's the sayings, and Eric, we're reading the same books at one time about the how to write a template, but those fabulous things like rinse and repeat, and where's the beef, it's always about coming up with some kind of a remarkably short but important message. So content and the message, and you had mentioned, Ken, offline that it's always been the same. Whether it was the old days with newspapers and catalogs or whatever, content was the king and the message. So explain us about the evolution. How take us from where you were back in the trenches in your early days and where we are now with marketing, and how content is still king and the messaging is the absolute critical thing.
Well, I think content will always be king. And right now, I think there's going to be even a greater focus on content and how you repurpose it. It's how it's delivered is changing. It used to be when we would come up with taglines, we had the old saying of what's the feature, advantage, and benefit. And we talked a lot about product features. And what we found now through research, voice of the client research, is they really don't care so much about the feature. They want to know, well, they need to know what it does, of course, but they want to know how it benefits them. So your content has changed shape in the way it talks about how it's going to improve their world and make them more competitive or solve problems that they have, as opposed to what the product does and what the brand is. Brand attributes are important, but people do business with people, and they do really like to do business with subject matter experts. So that's where you see content being shaped now. It's like I said, it's not so much as the brand itself and why the brand is great. It's more focused on what the product will do for me and making me more productive, more profitable, et cetera. And then how it's delivered. There's been a lot of focus put on digital, and digital is important. And does content have to be shaped for digital delivery? Absolutely. It's different. And the way you use it is a little bit different, be a podcast or a vlog or whatever it might be. But understand that digital is a delivery channel, much like radio was a delivery channel, outdoor boards, email, back to the door hangers that we used to find, they're called Velasas, was a great tool. But every tool has its lifespan, and you have to come up with a new strategy. The thing to remember about digital is to first understand your audience. How do they consume content? It could be that digital is the way to go. And for many products today, it is. But for a lot of industrial products, et cetera, there might be a different way. So you have to understand those nuances. The way I like to lay it out to a client is, all right, who is your client, specific client you're talking to? What's their title? What do they think now about your product? What do you want them to think? What's the key message and action that you want them to take? And then what's the best way to deliver that information to them? So you have a matrix that you can follow, because it could be different from a building engineer to, a property manager, who knows, whatever it is. But we need to get, and we have the ability to get, what their preferences are, understand their preferences, the tipping point in the client journey that's going to make them come to a decision, preferably one in your favor. So you've got to map it out. It's called client mapping. Every touch point, be it physical touch point or a content touch point, you've got to do it from the client's point of view. And that's where a lot of companies have been slow to move. They're not thinking about it the way that you talked about, Eric, about from the client's perspective. That's the difference between winners and losers.
Wow. And I think too, that at least in our industry, probably rightfully so up till now. I mean, I think the focus that people have been investing in has probably been, product development and sales development. And I think, we got some great marketing people in our industry, but I think for the most part, people probably think, well, business is tight. Let's pull back on the marketing budget. And what I hear you saying is probably the exact opposite. You probably need to spend more on the marketing than ever. And I think the other thing that's really challenging for our marketeers in our particular industry, Ken, and I guess it's probably true for all of them, is that we've kind of got at least two distinct sets of people, young people that want to be marketed to a certain way, and people like me and Ken that want to be marketed to differently. I think that's made it challenging for our marketing folks in our industry, because you got to really sort of package it two different ways, because both people are stakeholders, or both groups of people are stakeholders. And, I'm sure you've had that with your clients too. Speak about that sort of a challenge, and, how do you do that? How do you make sure everybody's getting served the meal they want to get served in the way they want to get it served?
Well, it's a great point. And the solution is called account-based marketing. We have technologies now today that, CRM, et cetera, that can tell us a lot about our particular client. And it's no different than we used to do years ago when I worked on McDonald's, which was you would have a campaign for Big Mac, but the campaign for urban stores versus rural stores versus suburban stores were a bit different. The people that were, showcased in it, kind of the product focus, the product attributes. We've done it in the past. We've just gotten away from it a little bit. So what was old is now new again, so to speak. The idea in account-based marketing is that you understand the decision factors that will influence your particular client and the demographic, et cetera, and you market to that with a specific message. And the great news is that technology allows us to do that. The mistake we make about marketing is, first off, we know from past pandemics, and while this is the worst one, is certainly not the first. We've had the bird flu, the swine flu. We've had 9/11. We've had the recession, things that made us focus our resources. And one of the things, there's always going to be winners and losers. Winners stay aggressive. They go after market share, and they use tools that are, that will gain them visibility, positive visibility. If you pull back and wait for things to be perfect, you're going to wait too long. That's true with marketing. But I think the overriding misnomer about marketing is, if you've got a product-driven company or a sales-driven company, you think of marketing as merely sales support. There's lots of levers in marketing that should be at the forefront right now. Content is marketing. Client service is marketing. Understanding, analytics and trends, that's marketing. So does it make sense to pull money from certain areas to fund others? Absolutely. But it's having the right mix of marketing tools right now that will keep you playing offense while other people are waiting.
Let me ask you a question. And Kenny, I'm going to let you hop in after this question. There's a statement that's, we're not sure who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't a fish. Meaning because the fish is in the water, they can't see the water. In your experience, and again, not to take anything away from the great marketeers in our industry, but I think this could apply to really pretty much anything. I mean, in your experience, do you find that by having an outside consultant like you come in, it helps people to see things that because they're like the fish, they just can't see it? Or I mean, how does that sort of play into it?
Absolutely. A set of fresh eyes is very, very valuable. One of the things that I found to be very productive is I will go into a client's key clients. If they segment their clients, which they should be doing, and you've got heavy users, medium and light, I'll go in and talk to a few clients and understand the current account health, what the sustainability is, what we're doing to meet their needs, where we're missing. And you can feed that information back and find out what the trends in the various segments that you're talking to.
Okay, but real quick, Ken, but I would look and say, I've got sales reps that do that. I mean, why would I need you to go do that?
I would tell you that I found that clients will tell me things that they won't tell their sales reps. And because they don't want to hurt their feelings, or maybe there's a problem with chemistry, et cetera. But if you ask the right probative questions, they will give you a roadmap to how to meet their needs, how to find new revenue streams, and how to meet their expectations. And what we don't know, this is especially true during the pandemic, we haven't been in front of them. We don't know what changes have happened in their account, in their structure, who you're dealing with, what business impact they've had. You can go in and find this information. Then that's called qualitative research. Then you add quantitative with surveys to help hone the specific things you're trying to find. The other key thing is that I have found, where your fish in the water analogy, is that when I go out on sales calls, I'll find that people are selling the way they've always sold. They're not doing discovery as much, especially when they're really experienced salespeople. We sometimes get a little egotistical in thinking we understand the problems of the client. You need to do a discovery to ask, what's going on, rank order what's most important to them. What are the key things, points of pain, that if they overcame that, business would be great. They'll share that information with you, and again, give you a roadmap on how to deliver value. Because again, the keys that we want to look at right now is revenue recovery, increasing profitability, increasing competitive advantage, and then certainly adding value to the client. That's what a client's going to look at, added value in making their decisions now more than they ever have. Consumerism is hitting everybody. They know that people are going to have to cater to their needs instead of us adapting to theirs. So that's, I think, important for people to know.
What are you thinking, Kenny?
Well, it's fabulous. I think the fresh eyes thing is very, very important. And young fresh eyes too, and experienced fresh eyes too. So the fresh eyes things, I think you're right. Everybody gets into their ruts, and you're now more than ever. People are so sensitive; they don't step on anybody's toe. They don't want to raise their head up and make any hard suggestions that are going to take people out of their sweet spots. You got a lot of people in our industry; they're very aged. They're autumn of their career, and they want to stay right where they're at. And so there's a lot of issues at hand, but some of the things I love is I had two marketing instances yesterday. One was just kind of a major manufacturer that they want us to schedule what we're doing with our marketing funds, and they don't want any surprises, and they evaluate it because they think that we're not doing a good job with the expenditure of our marketing funds. The second instance I had was where there's a new product release, and it was interesting how they do the sales funnel, and they talk about how they're going to get attention, newsletters, ads, graphics, email banners, live demos, sales cheat sheets for all the sales reps and salespeople, in case studies. So what they want to do is create awareness, consideration, evaluation, decision, and sale. And so this looks kind of new, but it's old, and Eric, you were always famous to say that, the major downhill marketing from the major vendors wasn't working because now the new clients and the new customers believe in that third-party attestation, that they go to another site. They want to see what people have to say. We used to go to Consumer Reports and different things to get an unbiased evaluation of the products or services. But now that's evolved into websites where people say this product's good, this product's not good. So I just was curious what Ken thinks about that kind of evolution that we went from being the beautiful Madison Avenue style where they just overwhelm you with the glib and the corporate messaging versus the homegrown people that were very successful. They did marketing that was basically gut based statements about how confident they were about being a subject matter expert or whatever. So with the evolution, Ken, where are we at now? Are we doing like a version of each, or like I just gave an example of what they're going to generate information on their products that they want to introduce. So they came up with a sales funnel, and the items that we're now supposed to employ to market this new product.
You know, there's a great golf coach, Martin Hall, who says, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. And for example, let's talk about sales enablement and collateral materials. Very important. Where that's been upgraded is what's called the Marketing Technology Hub, or MarTech Hub. So you have a automated system for your sales reps to create campaigns, drip campaigns, year-round campaigns to stay in front of the client with the right information. But it starts with knowing what the client wants in that information first and how they want it delivered. Right now, it's not like there's been anything revolutionary. It's been more evolutionary. Your podcast, for example, podcasts are great. Taking the information that you'd have in a static brochure and putting it into a podcast or a very informal video that you can push out through many different sources. That's where we're heading. It's repurposing content from your website to your podcast, to your blogs, whatever it might be. And again, it's hitting them at, it's a mix of media that can hit, because we do know that they can all consume it differently. So you want to touch, all the bases. But again, you've got to understand what their motivations are. Where we fail as marketers is to not understand the client expectations and their, what's important to them.
Ken, how important is timing in all this? You mentioned, first of all, define a drip campaign for people who might not know what that means, and how important is timing?
Well, I voided one of the key tenets in speech communications is speaking in your client's language, and salespeople should do that. A drip campaign is a mixture of, let's say you have a product launch, and you want to have a mix of in-office visits when that's available. You want to have emails that hit them at certain times of the sales cycle. You want to have videos. You want to send articles that might be pertinent to them. You might want to have a webinar. It's a mix of things that you do in a timed time period, giving what we call breath in between the hits so that they can have consideration. And then it's important to monitor it so that if the lead goes from the initial lead becomes hot, you can send the salespeople in after them. If it goes cold, you know when to stop, to cease, because you don't want to spam people. But again, it's just understanding the customer motivations and being in front of them. George Bush, number one, used to claim that one of the greatest techniques he ever used to make a name for himself, build recognition, was he had a Rolodex with all his, key people that he wanted to contact, and he knew something about them professionally and personally. And he would send articles. Hey, I thought you might find this interesting. And in doing so, he started networking. He built an incredible network sphere of influence. And that's how he got elected. The same thing is used in selling product, in marketing product, is helping people professionally and then helping them personally. One of the things that you can do with your clients, what's going to help them grow within their organization. You can provide them with information, not just about your product, but how they can grow personally, that from working with people in similar positions. That's how you build loyalty.
Well, Kenny, what I hear Ken saying is something you and I've said before, that like it or not, business is personal. And Kenny and I,
it sure is.
All things being equal or close to being equal, they're going to go with the people they like. I mean, if you're too far off or your product just won't do it, and I'm fond of telling our salespeople, they're people you want to do business with, and they're people you have to do business with. And you want to endeavor to always be somebody that people want to do business with. And I think that's just a great example, especially for some of maybe our younger people that are coming into the industry, the idea of, the Bush Rolodex. I mean, it doesn't have to be a Rolodex per se, but making it personal, showing interest in people maybe outside of the business.
Absolutely. And, the Rolodex is now CRM. That's one of the how we progressed from a technology standpoint. But it's so very true. You've got to look at research, in which I've done a lot of when it comes to branding. Branding is important. Branding, your strength of your brand is an insurance policy. It's the price of entry, and it puts you up on the scale of whether you're a top player or a medium player, et cetera. But no matter how strong your brand is, Eric, people do business with people. And they do business with people who are easy to work with. That's the key right now. And I think it's going to be the key for quite a while, experience marketing.
Well, I think so too. And then, Kenny, I'd like to get your opinion on this too. I mean, I have a belief now we're inundated with so much information that the two things that people don't have enough of are time and attention, right? So, if you do get somebody's time, you better not waste it. And how do you get their attention? And I'm just wondering from a market perspective, from your thought process, when you advise your clients, the whole age of the Twitter, the 142 characters, the instantaneous thing, how has that shaped that? Because I know you've done copywriting in the past and stuff like that. How does that shape how you advise people to write copy?
Well, it depends on the medium. If it's a blog, if it's social media, you certainly want to be concise. If it's a white paper or a best practice, you want to use a longer format to tell a different story. It's the mix of the way you tell your story and then how you drip it to your client. You've got to use the right weapon for the right, situation. But it's telling the entire story. No one's going to make a decision based on social media. There's some media, think of it this way. There's primary channels to tell your story. Then there's complementary. For example, when you're going down the highway, you can see a great billboard has maybe 7 words to it. And it gets out a thought that reinforces something you're hearing on radio or you've seen on TV. It doesn't tell the whole story. Social media does the same. Instagram does the same. It reinforces. It's a complementary medium.
Well, I know a guy that you study with, and I spent some time with a guy named Dan Kennedy. And for our audience out there who doesn't know, Dan Kennedy is probably one of the greatest. Him and Halbert were two of the greatest copywriters ever. And their theory was, and they were notorious for these very, very long pieces that they would send out. And their theory was that they're truly interested in your product, you can never write too much about it. So, but what I hear you saying is you better be able to hit all the channels. And I think that might be something that maybe is a little overlooked now with the new marketeers is they're trying to be so concise that when somebody really wants to do a deep dive, in other words, you have to hit all the bases, right?
You do. And one of the things about, let's talk about, you said young marketers. What you have to do is think in your client's language and how they consume, not how you consume. That's one of the things that we've got to always do. In terms of long format, look at Harvard Business Review. What they learned is that Ken Christensen, who is one of the greatest, I think, authors and thought leaders at Harvard.
Well, hang on a second. See, in relation to you, I noticed the last name's the same.
No, well, I wish. But what he started doing is he has an excerpt. It's called an abstract before every article. And if you just read that, you get the high points, and then you decide whether you want to read more. And that's how we have to think about how people consume information. And that way we put the right message through the right channel.
Well, Kenny, the other thing that, Ken did, he spent quite a bit of time with a commercial real estate firm. So, I mean, and a lot of our listeners are, the real estate folks. So, I know you've been tracking commercial real estate and what's going on. I mean, from your perspective, if you're a commercial real estate person trying to bring people back into the building, I mean, what are your sort of thought processes there, and what would you be advising clients to do in that domain?
You need to develop a story. You know, what marketers have become, what we've all become in sales as well, is storytellers. We've got to write the right narrative for the right situation. And I worked for a big real estate investment trust, and we were invested in Class A office buildings. And when you suggested my background there, I thought about LEED certification. And I remember when it first came out, we had the medallion we'd put on the building, and we understood what it meant, and maybe the office managers might understand it, or the property manager might understand it, but the people who worked in the building had no idea what it really meant or how it benefited them. I think as people come back into buildings, we've got to take more time to let everybody know that every safeguard has been taken to ensure their safety, and that you're following all the CDC protocols, and spell it out for them. Again, not with technical jargon, but with, this is why, if you have this concern, this is how we meet it. And you can't tell them once. You got to tell them in different ways, over a course of time. It's just like selling. The intent to purchase isn't key. Well, it is key. That's foolish to say that. But what's more important is intent to repurchase, to buy more over time, pay more, and refer other people to you. Same thing goes within communication. You've got to give them the story, and then you've got to keep reinforcing that story as you go, so people can actually tell that story to other folks. Let's say I'm sitting in an office and somebody tells me, I'm still very nervous about being here. And I'll go, well, wait a second. I heard in the webinar we had, where the property manager came out, they explained to all the systems. I guarantee it's safer here than in your home. It's safer here than in a restaurant or whatever. So if you want to work somewhere, this is a place to be. You want us to become advocates of what you're doing.
I almost kind of wonder, Kenny, if you would, you want to get people back in the building, you say, hey, if you get COVID in our building, we'll give you $10,000 or something like that. Probably a pretty safe bet if your building, right? Something like that would probably get somebody's attention, right?
I don't know how you would prove how they would prove where they got COVID. And I remember when we were first putting out notices on COVID and quarantine periods, you wouldn't shut down an operation quickly just because someone that worked there got COVID. They could have gotten it somewhere else, and it could be quarantine. You had other procedures and protocols that you have to implement, but there's ways of doing it. And then what's the advantage? The advantage to me is, there are some jobs that you can do from home, but there's some jobs that relate to collaboration, cybersecurity, et cetera, that I really need to be in an office to do. I need my people there that I can mentor them. There's such flat organizations now that, you don't have, you've got a lot of people that you've got to grow in their capabilities. So what's the advantage for the client? Well, greater productivity. What's the advantage of that to the employee? My learning curve is going to increase. It's like schooling right now. They're saying that this virtual education is going to set back students. Well, don't you think virtual collaboration at work is going to set that young marketer or young salesperson back a little bit, because they haven't learned the culture of the company, the disciplines, all the tricks? There's things you just can't learn on Zoom. So there's an advantage to them to being there. And if it's safe, why wouldn't I be? Plus the beauty of socialization. If I want to be around people. If I want to grow in a company, I don't just impress my boss. I've got to impress a lot of other people. And I can't do that sitting in my bedroom office. So you got to think of the things that motivate them and their growth, and answer that.
Unquestionably, well said. Again, this has been very enlightening for my own personal outlook. But the things that you mentioned, Eric, already are remarkable. I got my book out in preparation for, I think, the Boron Letters from Gary C. Halbert that we were into. Remember that back in the day? And some of our advertisement, structure comes from a guy who wrote a book back in 1902 or something. and so they send out all the little things in the magazines to get people's opinions or whatever, and give out coupons and whatever. But what you're saying, Ken, is that you've got to make the story interesting. And I've written down the story twice, repeat the story, reinforce the story. But when Eric and I were working on some things, we would always say about it was called an ethical bribe. Make sure we had something that was compelling, that built curiosity, and that made people pull on the string that would take them further into our whatever we were working on at the time. So is that still a safe thing to say, that, ethical bribe makes, incredible statements like oxymoron, but it really does.
I don't think you can use the word bribe in today's culture. I think that is politically incorrect.
Yeah, but again,
go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry.
But what I like about it is it does exactly what you're saying. It already incites controversy. It already incites attention. But the thing was that our vendors now in our control world, our building automation world, and our commercial components world, valves, actuators, as you all said at the very beginning, and they are so neck and neck with their feature benefits, their cost, their technical support, their marketing collateral. It comes down to the story. It comes down to who tells a better story, and then what, in place of an ethical bribe, would you say, Ken? So if you could come up with some of those ideas, we could probably refer you to a lot of people that will hear this will be very interested to know what's the new ethical bribe.
Well, Kenny, and what I hear sort of embedded in that might be what makes a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things. Again, I keep relating back to this, is you've got to understand the client point of view and write to their needs and expectations, sustainable expectations. And you've got to have a platform for delivering that story. And you've got to train people to be great storytellers. And that's through engagement. You've got, you can't sell anything outside until you can sell it internally. And one of the greatest lessons I ever gained was from one of the smartest men that I've ever been around, Horst Schulze, who's, co-founder of the Ritz-Carlton. And I had the opportunity to work for him in their consultancy, where they helped companies learn how to create memorable experiences to acquire new clients, to retain clients, et cetera. And he referred back to a statement made by Adam Smith. And that Adam Smith, that dates back a long time ago. He was a Scottish economist. And Adam Smith said, you're never going to get people, engage people by governance, by rules and regulations. And he was talking about employees. You've got to hit them with something that creates an epiphany for them. And what the Ritz did in joining the Ritz, they talked to you about joining their family. No matter what your role, you're a ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and you played a vital role in what was being done. And he hooked them on their purpose. He made sure that message was delivered by the general manager of every hotel when the new people started. He didn't wait till they were there 6 months or the story was shared by someone else. It was so important that you engage them in their purpose up front. Then you can share the rules and regulations. Same thing with products. You've got to engage them on how it's going to help them. It's going to make their world better. It's going to perform better for them. And then you can give them product attributes, et cetera. But it's learning how to, storytellers are going to win most of the competition for products, I think, because right now, folks want to know, think about it. We're in a state of confusion right now. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to look like. If you're out there and you've got a command of a story, a market dialogue, it doesn't have to be exactly where the economy is going or where your product is going to take them, but it's the fact that you're out there with a vision and it's relevant and you control the market dialogue, you're visible. They're going to beat a path to your door and follow in your slipstream. And then your competition is going to be me too. And no one wants to do business with me too. People want to do business with experts. So that I think that ability to tell a story, again, based on things that are meaningful to me as a consumer, is the way to go.
I think so too. And I think the first thing you have to do is you have to get their attention. I mean, that's the thing I tell my salespeople, you got to get their attention. Until you get their attention, break their state. I mean, how many times have you seen as a salesperson, I think it's even harder with marketing because you're not necessarily there to look at them, where, you walk in and they put their buyer face on, right? And they automatically go into that trance. I mean, go to any shopping mall and you see them and they're in a trance. So you got to get them out of that trance, right?
Certainly.
So one of the techniques that I would always use, hey, before we get started, could I ask you a couple of questions? But from a marketing standpoint, you have to be more precise than that. It usually starts, one technique I think, and you tell me if this is accurate, is asking a pertinent question. Are your sales, are your tenants canceling and your revenue's down and your board of directors breathing down your throat? If so, continue to read. If not, go play golf.
Well, that's certainly a provocative way of doing it. What I always like to do is...
Provocative is a great word. Kenny, he said the magic word, provocative. All right, now you've got my attention. Let's be provocative.
What we want to do in sales and in marketing is to create a burning platform, meaning they're standing on a platform that's on fire and they either jump, take action, or they become toast. And that's the reason why I like to get in front of the clients with and without salespeople. And you want to ask some questions, in discovery. And, let me ask you this, and let me understand your problems, and if we do all this, would this be a successful meeting for you? And then we're going to take 30 minutes to go over this. And if I've always found when you do that and define the parameters of what you're trying to get and what you can give them, and then put a time to it, they'll give you all the time in the world because they see you there as a problem solver. Again, an expert. They don't want to talk to somebody who is just going over feature advantage. Here's my product. Here's what it does. I don't care what it does. What does it do for me?
Well, that's we're always on that thread right there, Ken. In other words, the COVID-19 era that we went through, it's been over a year now, emphasized our abilities to do remote communication, in terms of our meetings and whatever. But in buildings, what we do, what our customers were always interested in was how you could improve their remote monitoring, their remote supervision, their remote configuration and programming. In other words, so that we learned that a great amount of our service calls and rolls of truck, the truck roll was costing $160 an hour or whatever, didn't need to go, and certainly didn't need to go without knowing what that technician needed to have, whether it was a failed sensor, whether it was a controller that shorted out or whatever it was. So our emphasis went into the ability for people to tell stories that they had the greatest, building remote communications. And when you did have connection, when you did have the internet was present and capable, and they had the front end that you could do remote access to and programming, that now shifted a whole lot. So the after effect is that people want to be able to remotely access and service, control and monitor, and then archive it, so that, like you were saying about the building, that we have the safest building. It's safer here in this building than it is at your house probably, because we've taken these measurements. We know exactly what your temperature, humidity, what your filtration is, what your the ventilation is, and then your ionization methods you're taking, your UV, what you have in place, so that you can tell these people with a building health dashboard, when you walk in here, this is a very healthy building because we've taken these measures. So this is our new thrust. This is what we're doing in this world. So how would you go to market with that sort of so it covers, our clients want to have greater remote capabilities, and they want to have the ability to display that they've got this building in the healthiest shape it can based on the limb facts that are in the building.
I go back to, I'll tell you another Ted Turner story. CNN sold, was broadcast over, or cable casted through cable operators all over the world. But we also sold news rights to local TV stations. If you ever wondered why you would see a CNN reporter on your local news, that's because they were buying the excerpt rights, because we were all over the world reporting on stories that they could access. And a huge number of the stations that used us were affiliates of ABC, NBC, and CBS. And all we had to do to get them, beyond the quality of the product and the journalism at the time, was to bring them in. We created a CNN studio tour where they could see the size of the CNN newsroom compared to the network's newsrooms. They could see all the assignment desks, all the writers, et cetera. It was overwhelming. And it allowed them to go, all right, this is bona fide and these people are doing the business we want to partner with. The dashboard that you set up for people to monitor, I'd share that with all the tenants. I'd let them see that. That's to me, that's a way of, one of the ways I'd market against remote is there's going, and I imagine all the real estate companies have productivity reports. I've seen research that says no more than 20% of workforce can actually work unmanaged at home for different for different functions. You're always going to have salespeople that may hotel within the company, but you're going to have functions that need to be there. You want to show, again, how it's safer for them to be in the office building than to be at home, and to tell their company, their leadership, hey, you don't have the cyber risk here. You can ensure productivity. I mean, especially when you have new people in the organization, how are they going to learn your culture, your work ethic, et cetera? If they're working from home, how is a more senior person going to mentor them? How are you going to, they say that culture beats strategy every time. How are you going to develop culture?
Whoa. Kenny Smyers, did you write that down?
Yep.
Culture beats strategy and beats strategy every time. I think Ted Turner would agree with that.
I think an engaged workforce, a passionate workforce, can beat an incumbent or a market leader if they're more engaged and they have, skin in the game. Do they want to win? One of the things at CNN is people would come and work there because in your first year, you could learn and do more than you could do at a network position in 6 years. That may be exaggerated, but because they were union and you couldn't get to do certain things for a while. So your learning curve was steep. I talk about learning curve to my employees. You're not going to have the same learning curve working from home. I think we also, at least it's my perception, that a lot of articles that are being written about people wanting, still working at home or remaining working remotely, they're all written from the employee's standpoint and not the employer's. I think the real estate companies, it's, how you said earlier that you never want to confront sometimes people with the hard facts. I think it's time to start doing that from the employer standpoint around productivity and security, et cetera, of, what happens if there's a huge opportunity or a crisis that you need to manage. I can tell you from being on a crisis management team for COVID-19, that couldn't have been done remotely. We had a war room that we were in every day working from it. Were certain subject matter experts brought in remotely? Yes, but the hub was in the headquarters building.
Well, really good points. Kenny, we're going to need to sort of begin to wrap this thing down. Kenny Smyers, any final questions for Ken?
No, like I say, it's been a fascinating conversation because, again, these are points that I think are very valid and very important at this particular time in our industry. And, we work with some people that, probably, 20, 30 really first-class organization companies, some of the biggest in the world, certainly the biggest in the building automation and the control space. And it's interesting to see how some of them are at different levels. Some of them are like, pumping every day. They're really channeling through LinkedIn, and then some of them aren't. Some of them are just absent. You wonder what they're thinking, what they're doing, because they're not in that social media stream that everybody seems to be in right now. I think Eric says it best that you got to put a filter on it because too much. It's almost like you resent opening up your email because there's 30 emails and about 5 of them are important, and the rest of them you don't know how they got you got hooked into this. So people are starting to push back on that. What is in your ability to gauge what we just talked about, what in the future, where do you see us, where should we put our chips again in kind of a summary format, what's the steps that we need to take to be more successful in the building automation and controls world?
Well, Kenny, I want to, I mean, that's a great question. And with your permission, what I'd like to do, Ken, is could you give us 3 key pieces that you would like to leave our audience with, 3, tenets that if they focus on these 3, they got a much better chance of being successful?
Well, first and foremost is content, but it's the right content based on the client's point of view. Secondly is expertise and thought leadership. You want to own issues that are of major importance to your clients. And then you want to add value to the client. And I think if you put all 3 of those together, develop a persona for your company, not just a name, but a persona, who you are, how you think, how you make decisions. And you want to touch people through a mix of medium, be it video, blogs, etc. But first and foremost, what I tell people right now is get somebody who can get in front of your clients, be it in person or Zoom, find out what your account health is with them, what the sustainability of that account is, what key things you need to overcome. And also, they might point an arrow at a revenue stream opportunity for you that you haven't even thought about.
Well said. Ken, can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking time to come in. I know occasionally you have spaces for additional consulting clients. If anybody's interested in getting more information about you, is there an email address they can reach out to you at?
Sure. It's Ken Christensen, 1142@gmail.com. And I'll spell that out for you. It's KEN.CHRISTENSEN1142@gmail.com.
Man, I know how busy you stay. I really appreciate you taking time to come talk with us today and share with our industry. Might indulge you later on down the line. Maybe we could get you to come back on, because I know this subject goes kind of on forever and ever. But man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, there you go. Hey, Kenny Smyers, man, we're going to wrap it up. We took our time with Ken, which I think was well spent. Any final comments before we do our outro?
No, it was a great pleasure. Pleased to meet you, Ken. And like I say, I did take some notes. I enjoy these kind of conversations because, again, the fresh eye thing I think is so important. I think we just somehow as human beings we fall into habits, rituals, and we don't like to move out of our sweet spots. And sometimes you need that little push. You need that little bit of review from an outside party that's, I wouldn't say disinterested party, because you're obviously interested, but you're not locked into the same biases that we are. So it's a good, refreshing conversation.
Well, there you go, man. So that is another episode of Control Talk Now, your smart buildings videocast and podcast, which is just a podcast this week. Special thanks to our guest, Ken Christensen, man. He is from the Ted Turner marketing guru pool and lineage. Man, Ken, thank you so much again. And with that, remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant. And let's add one, Kenny. Don't be a fish. Get out of the water.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny Smyers. And that's a wrap.